it exposes is if it was possible for ChatGPT to pass your exam, then you weren't teaching something that was useful enough. You weren't assessing on something that's useful enough. It's a big equalizer, and it's an equalizer in a great way. I mean, I think if you are trying to communicate in English and it's not your first language, it's kind of great.
And I'm on the negative side, I'm a little worried about the Nigerian scammers. Right now, they're very easy for me to pick out.
Yeah.
In the future, I don't know. Hi, everyone. This is Randy Xu at Lohan Academy. I'm very excited today to be hosting Professor Joshua Gans. We'll be talking about ChatGPT, what it means for AI and for society at large. So Joshua is a professor at the University of Toronto's Rotman School of Management. He holds a cross position as well in the Department of Economics. Joshua is also a prolific writer of many books on various topics. The ones that are most relevant to today's conversation are three he has co-authored with AJ Argawal and Avi Goldfarb. They are Prediction Machines in 2018, The Economics of AI in 2019, and most recently, Power and Prediction, published in November of 2022. So Joshua, I thought one way we could get started was if you could tell us how you became an expert in this topic of artificial intelligence.
Well, expert's an interesting term. I guess I'm more an expert in the economic impact of AI rather than the AI itself. This happened because about 10 years ago, through our startup program, the Creative Destruction Lab, we started getting a whole lot of applications of startups who are seeking to exploit artificial intelligence, by which they meant the new techniques of machine learning called deep learning, and also reinforcement learning. So interestingly enough, Canada was an area where the pioneers of these new methods had actually resided. One of them, Geoffrey Hinton, it was just down the road from us here at the Rotman School. And so, having seen these applications come in, we decided to, find out more about what artificial intelligence was about. What is what is different this time? Why is this potentially significant? And it was through asking those questions and talking to people that we started to learn about these techniques and try to understand what precisely they were doing.
So I think, getting us to bridging us to today, I think one concept you introduced in your first book is that essentially you could simplify the result of this technology as it gives us predictions on the cheap.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Like the internet reduced the cost of communication or coordination, right?
Right.
But this technology is now reducing the cost of prediction, which is the basis for how many decisions are made, right? So, and I think you also introduced the concept where we go from a lot of problems being algorithms, like we have to think about how to calculate, to predictions. You almost don't even have to know what, how exactly it's done. Is that true?
Yeah, in many respects. I mean, at the time, so at its heart, these new techniques are properly classified as an advance in statistics. They are, basically, and one of the goals of statistics is prediction, where you take the information you have and convert it to the information you want. Using the word prediction's a bit fraught, because we normally think about predictions as predictions of things like the future and things like that. But predictions could also be predictions about, well, what would a person think this is? For instance, if you sent me a statement in Mandarin and I used one of these AI-driven things to convert it to English as an English translation, what it is doing is predicting, given this paragraph of sentences in Mandarin, what would be the English equivalent of that to most people.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me to go back in time a bit. And many years ago, I was in college, and I actually minored in computer science. And I do remember taking a class on artificial intelligence, and it was a strategy class. This was a few years before the big data revolution. And we would solve problems like chess. And I remember at the time, the way that you would tackle the problem is that you would take more or less an algorithmic solution, so that you would study what humans do as a basis, and then you would try to figure out ways that you can calculate the value of a move, or more often the value of a position, of a board position. And you would have algorithms for trying to weigh them against each other, and then trying to also eliminate possibilities that are very bad, right? So that you don't have to waste the processing power on that. And my understanding is the current generation of artificial intelligence technologies actually doesn't do some of that. In fact, it's much more powerful. It's generally more powerful, because you almost sometimes don't even need to figure out exactly the value. The machine learning kind of figures out for you. Is that how you would see these technologies today?
Well, the way that these initial chess programs for artificial intelligence were developed was examining humans and how they played chess. And, when they did a move in this particular configuration of the board, did it ultimately result in a better position or winning or what have you? And that's how those algorithms were trained. But then it turned out that actually, in a lot of these games, you could just forget that. And you could have you just give the algorithm, you give the AI the goal of what's good is if you win and what's bad if you lose. And you have two AIs play against each other with lots of randomization, lots of other things going on, so that they in computer time rather than human time generate the data of what is a successful strategy. So, AlphaGo initially, when the Go tournament was trained on human data, AlphaZero, which is superior to AlphaGo, was without that at all. It was just the AIs learning for themselves.
Yeah, so I guess that kind of gets us to today. So maybe could you tell our audience how we got to ChatGPT and this kind of technology?
Right. So it occurred to, one of the benefits of artificial intelligence initially was that you could get really great results with fairly ordinary hardware. So even on your normal computer, you could do very well at training a neural network to outperform humans. But what happened was these companies realized, well, yeah, okay, we could stop there. Or alternatively, I mean, this technology is so good. What if we devoted a lot of computing power to this? What if we tried to, for instance, take all the information on the internet, synthesize it in some manner, combine that with the understanding of language and communication of language that results from it, and come up with what are essentially these large language models. These are models where you can put in fairly rich requests, and the machine so that'll be a prompt, and the machine is going to try to deliver you output that you think would be, that it predicts what you really like from that prompt. And so what ChatGPT does is you can put in a prompt such as, rewrite the words of the US national anthem in a rap style or something like that, or hip hop style. And what the machine is able to do is it predicts what you would think, what you were hoping that would be, even if you don't know it yourself. So the end result is it's a good output if you say, wow, that was a great reinterpretation of the US national anthem. But the key thing is it can sort of do it on anything. It can answer exam questions for students. It can actually output computer code which is one of the easiest things that it was able to do. It can, of course, do translation and stuff like that. And it can do things like you give it a fairly poorly written 800-word article and say, clean this up and make it coherent, and it really does. So you can see that there are just a whole lot of tasks where, to be sure, someone who is very expert and trained in it could do these tasks quickly themselves. But what ChatGPT does is it allows, people with no training, virtually no training, knowing who at the very least can judge what they want, and ask for what they want, to produce very high quality work. It's a process we call upskilling. It's the same process that when we had GPS navigation allowed everybody to become, even tourists, to become expert with getting around a city.
Yeah, I'll get back to that problem later, which is, the relative skills between people, right?
Right.
How that changes. But, I guess the immediate question is, it seems like we've had this, the initial thinking about artificial intelligence, that somehow computers would get faster and you would have a way to mimic human thought. And turns out maybe a lot of what we interact with day to day is just people making decisions, maybe pattern recognition, right? I think you quote someone that says prediction is the basis for human intelligence, and maybe prediction is often based on patterns. Maybe a lot of what we do day to day isn't, for every Hemingway, perhaps there are many of us who most of the time, 95% of the time, are just writing something that is like something else we've written before. Even decisions, I wonder about how many corporate decisions are made based on, someone else is doing this, or someone, there's a pattern for this. So I think that kind of raises a question, like, is it, because it's been a wow moment with ChatGPT. Everyone's been talking about it,
Yes.
even in China. Funny enough, there is a service now that everyone knows about that gives you a US text message, because you have to have one to sign up for it, because everyone's been wanting to try this. So maybe this wow moment, it isn't really that, intelligence has, computers have gotten more intelligent, that a lot of what we do isn't actually that intelligent.
No, I think that's an excellent way of putting it. I think people have misunderestimated how much of what they do on a day-to-day basis is the term routine seems a little strong, but it's almost that. There's stuff that you do because you're doing a lot of things and you have to coordinate them all together. But they take time. So responding to an email or something like that, or trying to clean up your code or what have you, that turns out is not taking a genius to do that. You're using the non-genius portion of your brain to do that. And I think I think the surprise with ChatGPT is how you could put out one service like this that could, in one stroke, do so much of that. And enable that. In fact, the skill that you need to really use these things properly is knowing what to ask, knowing how far you can go. And that's a new skill. We have not had that skill before. So, you see these generative AI that allows you to get artwork or pictures or other things you want. Well, you put in short prompts, it's kind of hard to know what it is and stuff comes up. But if you put in very, very detailed prompts, specifying exactly what you want to see, etc., it's like you're just asking somebody to draw it for you, but being very clear. It'll do it. It'll do it in seconds, and you can get exactly what you want. And you see that it's all over the place now. You see it in newspaper articles and things like that, where instead of going to Getty Images to get something that was a real image, they said, oh, well, I know what sort of image I want for the top of this article. Well, they just ask for it. They can ask for the style, they can ask for what it's going to show, and interestingly enough, asking the question, is something that's taken a lot of human cognition. Asking for what you want is the issue. It turns out that that's the hard bit. That's the stuff that, AI may eventually predict what you want. I don't know, but right at the moment it can't. But the better you are at that, the more you're going to get out of these AIs. Previously, what you would do is you would ask the question and do it all in your mind, and it would all be one big mush of stuff. But now these new programs are forcing you to be, if you can be clearer on the amount of question on that sort of side of the task, on the prompt, you can get a lot more mileage quickly.
I mean, how do you think this changes, relative skill sets? I think you give the example, for example, of it used to be the case in places like London where a taxi driver who's been driving around for a while would know almost every waypoint, right? And GPS changes that. Now any bloke can go in and know where to drive. So how do you think this changes between people? And also, I think an important thing you point out in your books is between organizations, right?
Yes. Also, I think there's going to be scope for it. I don't think we've only had this tool sort of floating around, and it's not the best that tool can be, and all that sort of stuff. And so we've only had it throwing around thus far, and people have mostly used it as a toy. and of course that will wear out a bit later. That's not an exciting thing to do. And there's been a lot of concern, like in academia, there's a lot of concern about, if you give students an assignment, they can do the assignment in 3 seconds now just by putting the assignment straight into ChatGPT. If they want to get a really good grade, it won't work. But if you want to pass,
I mean, well, one of the questions is what do you do as a teacher? Like, what do you teach to now? Like, maybe it's relatively speaking, you need to teach other skills, right?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, I'm not concerned for my own courses because I haven't been assessing in this sort of rote way. It exposes the answer should not be, oh no, now all the students can cheat and I don't know what I'm going to do. Like assessment has no meaning. No, what it exposes is if it was possible for ChatGPT to pass your exam, then you weren't teaching something that was useful enough. You weren't assessing on something that's useful enough. What it challenges to say is, was this a good piece of assessment if all it takes is this? And the answer is probably not. And so it forces you to start thinking about what I should really be creating as assessment. I mean, if I want to test students' knowledge without ChatGPT, I put them into a room without the internet. If I want to test students' ability to apply this knowledge outside of the classroom in the future, I want them to have ChatGPT. I want them to use it so that I can assess their ability on stuff that isn't that. So in retrospect, it's both a wake-up call and also a natural evolution of how we do things. But I think to the same thing is within organizations. If it was really possible, now you can go and you can do a press release in ChatGPT 3 by giving a bit of information. Well, you've got to say to yourself, is that press release useful? Is it really useful? I mean, everybody who read press releases before ChatGPT didn't believe that they were great works of writing. And they might read them and maybe they get a bit of information from them and stuff like that. But you've got to ask yourself, was this the best way of communicating going on here? Is it adding a whole lot of stuff that we just add out of convention? Is it actually useful? Now, I don't know what the answer to that will be. I have this sneaking suspicion it'll turn out a lot of things we do are wasteful, but who knows? But so I'm not sure, so 2 things might happen to those tasks. One is they'll become really easy to do. The danger of that we'll get flooded with press releases, so that'll be useless. The other is that people will realize that these were useless all to begin with, and they'll become a thing of the past. But I think the real hits with ChatGPT are going to be where it really is helping something in their job. The providing of code, the ability to do computer code and to debug it and to write initial versions of it and those sorts of things, that sort of thing is going to be very, very useful. I can imagine, and I think we haven't even worked out where some of those great productivity benefits might come from with something like this. This is just like it is the first version. Even the version we see is 3 years old in its underlying technology. But you know, I think we've just been handed this tool. I think it's safe to say it's going to be really useful, and it's going to change jobs in the way that the spreadsheet changed jobs. And so I think we're on that score. Is it going to do more than that? I don't know. I don't think so. But spreadsheet's pretty big.
I think Wired had a headline that was something like, you know, now they'll use this to sell you things, right? And I'm on the negative side, I'm a little worried about the Nigerian scammers. Right now, they're very easy for me to pick out.
Yeah.
In the future, I don't know. And another thought I had is on the relative side, you know, and this leads to my other question, but on the relative side, so I was a geeky kid growing up, nerdy kid. I studied well, and I generally, most of my friends, went to relatively prestigious schools. And my find is, not that actually means anything in terms of skills for us, but there's one way that you can definitely tell, where when people write emails, right? Like generally, my friends have good punctuation, good capitalization. And I guess going forward, that's not going to be important anymore, right? All that, English class training or AP English,
Yes.
whatever you got, because everyone will be able to write, a perfectly formatted kind of email. So
Right.
in a way, maybe this is more equalizing for society. On the other hand, everyone is now worried that, the automation, it's the same arguments for automation. This will help capital holders. Workers will lose out, right? Because everyone will be, and so how do you think this all plays out?
Look, so you've hit things correctly. I agree with you. It's a big equalizer, and it's an equalizer in a great way. I mean, I think if you are trying to communicate in English and it's not your first language, it's kind of great. I mean, how many years did you spend studying English? Or to have a second language and to get fluent in it and stuff like that. It's kind of great if we don't need to do that. If people can just learn their local languages and function 100% around the world. I mean, it's like a dream. So I don't think that's a bad thing. But on that score, is this really a capital thing? Capital advantage? I'm not so sure, because basically what we've said, everything we've talked about now is how you take a person trying to do their job and they can do it 10 times better or 10 times faster as a result of what these things can do. Well, that makes people more useful, more valuable, etc. There's always more stuff for us to do. And this allows us to do it. Again, the spreadsheet analogy is there. Prior to spreadsheets, people had to do all of those calculations, everything laboriously themselves. So they did current calculations, but there were a whole lot of calculations they never did. Spreadsheet comes in, it boosts their productivity. They're able to do their current stuff much quicker, and they're able to do new stuff that they would never have had time for before. I think the same thing is true here. I don't think that this technology as we see it right now is going to be sort of like, oh, well, now I can fire someone because I can now do this. There was a person who I used to ask all these questions. I can now just ChatGPT 3 and that's it. But I think we're if you think about it this way, ChatGPT, like the spreadsheet, equalizes everybody's ability to answer questions. On the other hand, that increases the demand and that increases the demand or worthwhileness of asking questions. And so effectively, we'll do that. That's people have to ask those questions. The machine's not asking any questions.
Yeah, I think a lot of our scholars generally think, historically there's been that lump of labor fallacy, right? There's only so much work to do. And as it turns out, there's actually a lot of work right now we don't have time for. It's that if I had more time, I would do,
Right.
there's a queue of things I
Yes.
could do. And it seems like, ChatGPT like technologies can kind of help with that. And like I said, there's still a lot of bad writing in the world, right?
Right.
And some of it is due to the fact that maybe, again, someone in another country, it's not their native language. Now they can sell better. Now they can do that.
Right.
So there will be this great, there will be this equalization.
Well,
But I suppose you are generally more optimistic that there will be fewer losers than there are winners.
yeah, I am. I mean, I am, because I think we've seen very big technological revolutions before, and we haven't seen massive long-term unemployment. And there's nothing I can see here. Yes, it's powerful, but there's nothing I can see here that suggests it's going to be fundamentally different. And that's, again, going back to what we discussed earlier. These aren't really thinking machines. These are predicting machines. Okay. And I guess I'm in the school of people who believe that we ourselves are more than prediction machines. that there's something more to cognition than that. But it's very hard to prove. But the way I think about it is this: I have a dog, and my dog believes that they have successfully kept the house safe from any squirrel that comes near it. And why does my dog think that? Because whenever a squirrel comes near the house, my dog barks and continues to bark until the squirrel goes. And you know what? Every squirrel has gone. So from that point of view, her belief is fully 100% justified. Now, I happen to know that the squirrel couldn't care less about the dog and is going about its business because the dog, my dog, is sort of predicting their own action, but doesn't know how to do causal inference and to understand what what the squirrel might have otherwise been doing had there been no barking, which is of course nothing different. But then you see these videos on the internet where a person is playing on the side of a river with their dog, and they jump into the river, and the dog runs around thinking that they've fallen in, and then works out that they need to do something to rescue them. They haven't had that experience before, but they've got some idea that for the way they seem to be in the water is dangerous, and the dog has to come up with a new way to deal with that. Now that process, so even in a dog, that doesn't look like prediction to me. That is like the dog has a belief that is formed out of something that is not in their experience. That's not prediction. No machine can do what that dog did.
Yeah, I think the way one of our other fellows, Eric Brynolfsson, mentions it, he analogizes it to looking at a magician levitating, a volunteer, right? And thinking that the magician has defeated gravity, right? When
Right.
it's actually doing something different, right? But yeah, I think maybe I think we're hitting time, so we're gonna wrap up soon. But maybe I should ask you, what are the 1, 2, 3 coolest things you've seen done with it so far?
So the coolest things done so far have been we wrote a HBR article on ChatGPT, and there was myself, Jay, and Avi wrote, we discussed it. He wrote down some initial notes that were just notes, terrible, unreadable. And normally what would happen is I would take that and write that into a lovely written piece. Instead, I took those notes, I cut and pasted them into GPT-3 and said, please just clean this up and write it into a 700-word piece. And it did. And by the way, it was exactly 700 words that came out of it. And then we edited from there. But, essentially 90% of the piece was written by ChatGPT thing. And so, this was done in a few seconds, where it might have taken me half an hour to an hour to have done the equivalent thing. But that was pretty impressive to me. I didn't think it would do, and because it wasn't just taking these notes, it was ordering it into a clear way with paragraphs and topic sentences and all the other things you do. It was really made it far more readable. So I think that is fantastic. The second things that I think are really interesting is you can coax ChatGPT to do really complicated things. I love to tell you, but like my colleague Kevin Bryan wondered if he could get ChatGPT in 20 minutes to write a paper, and here it is. And this paper is formatted in tech. You can see nicely formatted. It's obviously pretty well written. And not only that, it's got a proposition and it's got a half correct proof going on there. All formatted, done with prompts using ChatGPT 3. So that's interesting. There's some way of combining different things together that you might be able to do with this thing. That's only that we don't know yet. The third thing we have that I think was just around the corner is we're going to get a music one of these. We're going to get one of these that can create music and put in all the stuff without you having to know the language of how you put music together. That's going to be pretty interesting because music is something that people sort of understand what they like, but there's a whole lot of skill in producing it. Well, if you can just ask for it, you can say, take these words, put into a song, change it to a rock beat, change it to an orchestral, output the music. That's going to be interesting. I think literally in the next year, we should see that.
Wow. Okay. So for people like me without musical talent, I'm going to look forward to this.
Same here.
I still have a chance.
No, it'll be fascinating. You just get all these kids will start producing stuff, and some of them, and there's going to be some good ones. There's like literally very shortly after it, there's like going to be a #1 out of that.
Okay. Great. So it sounds like at least we're ending on a slightly optimistic note of we're not running into a dystopian future where no one has jobs and there's an overlord of whoever owns this like expensive model, right? But I guess looking further afield, I think you're a fan of Star Trek, like I am.
I am.
And we were talking on Twitter about Babylon 5 the other day too, which, by the way, it's been a while since I've talked with anyone about it. I'm sure there are many fans, but because it's kind of a more niche, right, show, I think you always assume no one else is watching it, but it's great to know that other people were. But anyway, economically, going back to economics.
It was us who had the discussion about whether that was why they keep on naming in Babylon after Babylon 5 after Babylon 1 through 4 destroyed, respectively.
Yeah, so the backstory behind this for the audience who might be very confused is the show is called Babylon 5 because this is a 5th station. All the other ones were destroyed, sabotaged, or disappeared, and somehow they built a 5th one, right? Like usually you think if you hit your head against the wall, you stop doing it. But so here, I guess here's the crux of the question. Babylon 5 is kind of like human society today ported into the future, right? There's poor people. There's even an underclass of people who live in the below deck in the station. But Star Trek, The Next Generation, is a much different. The economics of Star Trek is basically as utopian as you can get. I think there's a speech that the captain gives where he's talking to some 21st century humans who were frozen and they found them. He says, this rich guy wakes up and says, I want to call my lawyer right away, right, because of my assets. And Picard goes to him, Captain Picard, and says, don't you understand the 24th century? There's no money. Everyone just does what they love.
This is the 24th century. Material needs no longer exist.
Then what's the challenge?
How do we get to that future? Do you think we're starting to see these technologies that can get us there?
Well, I think we get to it by, solving the economic problem, which is basic scarcity of stuff, which I think the argument was that Star Trek had done that. Of course, as you know, that was sort of the next generation view. In some of the subsequent ones, they found it necessary to reintroduce some of those Babylon 5 underclass elements and power grabbing, and the Ferengi, they're still after the money. The Latinum, not sure who issued the Latinum. I'm also we should be surprised that you know, Star Trek is in the future, and the thing they conceived of as this money was gold pressed Latinum, which is a physical thing. In what world are they carrying that around?
People.
Surely they have a cryptocurrency. Oh, we could go on this forever, but yeah, no, you were right. I mean, but the world is not going to create the future just because it's interesting for 21st century pop culture. It's going to create the future it's going to create, and you know, I have some optimism that we will be able to get that we slowly are solving the economic problem, and so I'm certainly a Star Trek one. In fact, I should plug. I know you were plugging this. I should plug one of my books. It's called Innovation Plus Equality. It was co-authored with Andrew Lee, and it's basically how to create a future that is more Star Trek than Terminator. And so exactly this sort of question.
Well, as there's all this anxiety now, I think we should at some point have you back to talk about that better future. But thank you so much. You know, we appreciate all your support. You know, you're I forgot to mention, you're a distinguished fellow of the Lohan Academy, and you've been on several of our programs to talk about various topics that you're researching. So we really appreciate this chance to sit down with you. We're looking forward, you know, to that book talk with your co-author Avi.
Yeah.
And
excellent. All right. Well, thank you very much. I've enjoyed it.
Great. Thank you so much.